Yeah, I'll be happy to do that. This is a great question to end the whole thing with, actually. The question is, the King James Bible, produced in 1611, the New Testament was based on half a dozen Greek New Testament manuscripts. What are our modern translations based on today, and what are some of the differences between the two? Well, the King James Bible was based on 6 manuscripts no earlier than the 12th century, and it was produced at the beginning of the 17th century, so they go back 500 years. Today we have nearly 6,000 Greek manuscripts, so almost 1,000 times as many manuscripts as they had in the King James day. And we have manuscripts that don't go back just to the 12th century, but all the way back to the 2nd century. So our basis is much earlier, and it's much stronger. In terms of the differences, in the Greek texts behind the King James and modern texts, there's about 5,000 differences. Now, the vast majority of these can't even be translated, so they are irrelevant. But there are several, a few hundred that really can be and do have some significance to them. The King James, let me give 2 illustrations. This would be a good way to conclude this. When Erasmus, he was a Dutch scholar who published the first Greek New Testament in 1516. And in his first edition, the printing press had just come out 65 years earlier, and consequently Erasmus publishes this Greek New Testament. And then there was a critique of it, because they were saying, wait a minute, you didn't have at 1 John 5:7 what we have in the King James Bible, or what they had in the Latin Vulgate at the time. Let me ask you to look at that verse. This is a good place to look. And then we'll look also at Revelation 22. First John, does anybody have a King James Bible here, or a New King James? Okay, would you be able to read 1 John 5:7 in the New King James, please? Yes, 1 John 5:7. Okay, if you have a modern translation, did it sound the same way? Did you notice differences? Are the 3 witnesses in heaven? Are the witnesses the Father, the Word, and the Spirit? No, in the NIV, what you have here is, for there are 3 that testify, the Spirit, the water, and the blood, and the 3 are in agreement. So it's quite different, and that's in 1 John 5:7. And then there is no 1 John 5:8 in this translation, because that was a verse, this verse that's in the King James Bible, that the NIV editors did not have, and here's why. That verse in the King James seems to be the strongest affirmation of the Trinity we have in the Bible, and yet it was not part of the original text of the New Testament. Now, the early church examined the New Testament and came to the belief of the Trinity entirely apart from this verse, but here's how this verse got into the Bible. Erasmus publishes his first text in 1516, his second Greek New Testament in 1519, and by that time there were lots of Roman Catholic authorities who were saying, wait a minute, this is a problem. You don't have the verse in 1 John 5:7 that is the Trinitarian formula. And he said, I didn't put it in because I could not find any manuscripts that had it. So in 1520, there was a scribe who was working at Oxford University who transcribed the entire Greek New Testament as a handwritten manuscript. And his name was Roy, by the way. And then that manuscript somehow ended up at the doorstep of Erasmus in Basel, Switzerland, where he was working. And so this new manuscript that he was left on his doorstep had the Trinitarian formula in 1 John 5:7, because that scribe named Roy put it in. He translated some late manuscripts back into Greek. And to this day, we have 8 manuscripts that have that Trinitarian formula in them, but they're all from the 16th century or later. So it doesn't look like it goes back to the original. Well, in Erasmus's 3rd edition, he put it in because he said, I didn't put it in because I couldn't find any manuscripts, and so he finds a manuscript, so therefore he puts it in his text. And that's why in the King James and in English-speaking Bibles, we've had this history of this Trinitarian formula. Luther is basing his translation on the 1519 text, before this Trinitarian formula was put in, and the German Christianity has never had this kind of an issue. It's been kind of a lightning rod, especially for King James only people, that they're saying, you modern translation people are destroying the Trinity by cutting out this verse. No, what we're doing is we're going with the evidence, and the evidence is so compelling among the hundreds of earlier manuscripts that don't have it, that this must have been added later. So that's one text. I'd love for that to be in the Bible, but there's not historical reasons to put it in. And again, you can affirm the Trinity without this verse. The other text is Revelation 22. Let me ask you to look at that. We've got like about a minute left again. Okay. Very last chapter of the Bible. Revelation 22 and verse 19. And if anyone takes away words from this book of prophecy, God will take away from him his share in the tree of life and in the holy city, which are described in this book. Now, ma'am, you have the King James. Can you read that verse for us? Okay, so the one word difference is God will take away from his part in the book of life instead of in the tree of life. That book of life, if you have your part taken out of the book of life, that means your name is taken out of the book of life, it seems. And this is the one verse that could be used to argue that we lose our salvation if we are doing something wrong. I believe in what's called eternal security, that we cannot lose our salvation. But that text, here's what happened. Here's how it got into the King James Bible. When Erasmus was trying to put together his published Greek New Testament, he had one manuscript for Revelation. And it just so happened when he got to the last leaf of Revelation, the last page, it was missing. That's what happens with a codex. The outside leaves are the ones that fall off the fastest. So to rush this to the publisher, because he knew others were trying to get a Greek New Testament done, he back-translated from Latin into Greek for the last 6 verses of Revelation. And he created 17 textual variants that are not found in any other Greek manuscripts ever. So that's the basis that the King James has here. This issue here is an intra-Latin issue. It has to do with the difference between the word tree and book, which in Latin are very similar to each other, ligno and libro. But in Greek, they're not at all similar to each other. So either he mistranslated the Latin and put in book of life instead of tree of life, or he was dealing with a defective Latin manuscript that had book of life instead of tree of life. That's the basis, though, for the King James. I would say the King James Bible still teaches the same essentials as modern translations. You can be a Christian reading the King James just as you can be with modern translations. My hope is that you will use a modern translation because it's going to be closer to the original and tell us more what the apostles actually taught. And it's going to strengthen our faith that much more. Thank you, folks, for this morning. I appreciate it very much.